The life of the Universal Church was enriched by the discernment of the Aparecida Conference, in which Latin American bishops made clear that the Church's preferential option for the poor is implicit in the Christological faith in the God who became poor for us, so as to enrich us with his poverty. The Aparecida document situates the Church's mission in the present context of a globalized world marked by new and dramatic imbalances. In their final message, the bishops wrote, "The stark differences between rich and poor invite us to work with a greater commitment to being disciples capable of sharing the table of life, the table of all the sons and daughters of the Father, a table that is open and inclusive, from which no one is excluded. We therefore reaffirm our preferential and evangelical option for the poor." At the same time, the document, taking up a theme treated in earlier conferences of the Latin American episcopate, insists on the need to consider marginalized communities as subjects, in italics, capable of creating their own culture rather than as objects of charity on the part of others. This means that such communities have the right to embrace the gospel and to celebrate and communicate their faith in accord with the values present within their own cultures. Their experience of poverty gives them the ability to recognize aspects of reality that others cannot see. For this reason, society needs to listen to them. The same holds true for the Church, which should regard positively their popular practice of the faith. A fine passage from the Aparecida document can help us reflect on this point and our proper response. Only the closeness that makes us friends enables us to appreciate deeply the values of the poor today, their legitimate desires, and their own manner of living the faith. Day by day, the poor become agents of evangelization and of comprehensive human promotion. They educate their children in the faith, engage in ongoing solidarity among relatives and neighbors, constantly seek God, and give life to the Church's pilgrimage. In the light of the gospel, we recognize their immense dignity and their sacred worth in the eyes of Christ, who was poor like them and excluded among them. Based on this experience of faith, we will share with them the defense of their rights. All this entails one aspect of the option for the poor that we must constantly keep in mind, namely, that it demands of us an attitude of attentiveness to others. This loving attentiveness is the beginning of a true concern for their person, which inspires me effectively to seek their good. This entails appreciating the poor in their goodness, in their experience of life, in their culture, and in their ways of living the faith. True love is always contemplative and permits us to serve the other not out of necessity or vanity, but rather because he or she is beautiful above and beyond mere appearances. Only on the basis of this real and sincere closeness can we properly accompany the poor on their path of liberation. For this reason, I express my heartfelt gratitude to all those who have chosen to live among the poor, not merely to pay them an occasional visit, but to live with them as they do. Such a decision should be deemed one of the highest forms of evangelical life. In light of this, it is evident that all of us must let ourselves be evangelized by the poor and acknowledge the mysterious wisdom which God wished to share with us and wishes to share with us through them. Growing up in precarious circumstances, learning to survive in the most adverse conditions, trusting in God with the assurance that no one else takes them seriously, and helping one another in the darkest moments, the poor have learned many things that they keep hidden in their hearts. Those of us who have not had similar experiences of living this way certainly have much to gain from the source of wisdom that is the experience of the poor. Only by relating our complaints to their suffering and privations can we experience a reproof that can challenge us to simplify our lives. Chapter 5. A Constant Challenge. I have chosen to recall the age-old history of the Church's care for the poor and with the poor in order to make clear that it has always been a central part of her life. Indeed, caring for the poor is part of the Church's great condition, a beacon, as it were, of evangelical light, to illumine the hearts and guide the decisions of Christians in every age. That is why we must feel bound to invite everyone to share in the light and life born of recognizing Christ in the faces of the suffering and those in need. Love for the poor is an essential element of the history of God's dealing with us. It rises up from the heart of the Church as a constant appeal to the hearts of the faithful, both individually and in our communities. As the body of Christ, the Church experiences the lives of the poor as her very flesh, for theirs is a privileged place within the people of God, within the pilgrim people of God. Consequently, love for the poor, whatever the form their poverty may take, is the evangelical hallmark of a church faithful to the heart of God. Indeed, one of the priorities of every movement of renewal within the church has always been a preferential concern for the poor. In this sense, her work with the poor differs in its inspiration and method from the work carried out by any other humanitarian organization. No Christian can regard the poor simply as a societal problem. They are part of our family. They are one of us. Nor can our relationship to the poor be reduced to merely another ecclesial activity or function. In the words of the Aparecida document, we are asked to devote time to the poor, to give them loving attention, to listen to them with interest, to stand by them in difficult moments, choosing to spend hours, weeks, or years of our lives with them, and striving to transform their situations starting from them. We cannot forget that this is what Jesus himself proposed in his actions and by his words. The Good Samaritan, once again. The dominant culture at the beginning of this millennium would have us abandon the poor to their fate and consider them unworthy of attention, much less our respect. Pope Francis, in his encyclical Fratelli Tutti, challenged us to reflect on the parable of the Good Samaritan, which presents the different reactions of those confronted by the sight of a wounded man lying on the road. Only the Good Samaritan stops and cares for him. Pope Francis went on to ask each of us, which of these persons do you identify with? This question, blunt as it is direct and incisive. Which of these characters do you resemble? We need to acknowledge that we are constantly tempted to ignore others, especially the weak. Let's admit that, for all the progress we have made, we are still illiterate when it comes to accompanying, caring for, and supporting the most frail and vulnerable members of our developed societies. We have become accustomed to looking the other way, passing by and ignoring situations until they affect us directly. It is important for us to realize that the story of the Good Samaritan remains timely even today. If I encounter a person sleeping outdoors on a cold night, I can view him or her as an annoyance, an idler, an obstacle in my path, a troubling sight, a problem for politicians to sort out, or even a piece of refuse cluttering a public space. Or I can respond with faith and charity and see in this person a human being with a dignity identical to my own, a creature infinitely loved by the Father, an image of God, a brother or sister redeemed by Christ. That is what it is to be a Christian. Can holiness somehow be understood apart from this lively recognition of the dignity of each human being? What did the Good Samaritan do? These questions become all the more urgent in light of a serious flaw present in the life of our societies, but also in our Christian communities. The many forms of indifference we see all around us are, in fact, signs of an approach to life that is spreading in various and subtle ways. What is more, caught up as we are with our own needs, the sight of a person who is suffering disturbs us. It makes us uneasy, since we have no time to waste on other people's problems. These are symptoms of an unhealthy society, a society that seeks prosperity but turns its back on suffering. May we not sink to such depths. Let us look to the example of the Good Samaritan. The final words of the Gospel parable, "Go and do likewise," represent a mandate that every Christian must daily take to heart.